would pull out my map and pretend to be writing stuff on the map just so that they'd be forced to wait and I could catch my breath. At that time, the Baviaanskloof was not well known at all. Every aspect of what we wanted a hiker to experience had to be wow. Maybe it's a bit philosophical, it's just a hiking trail. But we really wanted something that told a story as you walk through the landscape. And its entire purpose is to serve the community in a whole bunch of different ways. He's one of the most remarkable human beings I've ever met, and I feel incredibly grateful and privileged to count him as a friend and a partner in everything we do in the Baviaanskloof. So we set out from the beginning to create a business, even though it's community-owned, but a business that would blow people away. We're very interested in those people who want to come and experience Baviaanskloof outside of their car.
Hi guys, I'm Zane from oZONE, and we're talking about the Leopard Trail. It's a 4-day hiking trail in the magnificent World Heritage Site of the Baviaanskloof Mega Reserve in South Africa in the Eastern Cape. It's between the Koga mountain range and the Baviaans mountain range, and that's where the hike takes place. And it's one of the iconic and very popular hikes in South Africa. I'm joined with Linden Booth, the founder of the Leopard Trail, and Jacques also from oZONE, and co-host in this little Zoom session / podcast session of ours. Welcome, guys.
Hey, lucky to be here.
Thanks, Zane. It's great to be here with two legends.
Great. I'm going to ask Jacques. He's got more of a way with words to set the tone of the Baviaanskloof and where this trail takes place. Jacques, just give us a bit of an idea of Cedar Falls and where this trail is nestled into the mountains.
Yeah, look, my relationship with Baviaanskloof is a relatively long and ongoing one. We've been sort of missioning through the kloof for quite a while, but it was only, I would say, about 5 or 6 years ago when I heard about the Leopard Trail, of course, and I was at the time shooting Trans-Baviaans with Zane, and we made a mission to go and explore the Leopard Trail because Zane was looking at part of eco-bound events to put together the Leopard Run. So we did a little bit of a recce, and I was completely and utterly blown away. And it's one of those Old Testament landscapes where it looks as if a whole lot of pissed off gods got together and just blew the whole world up. It really is. It's like such a spectacular landscape. I think the year we went there was just after the massive fire you guys had there. So the landscape was just bare and minimalist and dramatic, and all the rocks had shattered, and you had these like blackened tree trunks and vegetation. So it was like a minimalist, monochromatic world of just, jaw-dropping drama. You walked in there and you were just blown away. And as I explored the place and the mountains and started shooting imagery around it, I just realized how immense and vast it all was. And as you start looking at the landscape, you really get drawn into it. And then when we had an opportunity to return later on and explore Cedar Falls more leisurely, I obviously jumped at that opportunity. Now, Cedar Falls, just background for anybody who hasn't been to Leopard Trail, hasn't done the Leopard Run, or haven't been into the Baviaanskloof, you get the Baviaanskloof Mega Reserve, which is, I think, the largest or the second largest World Heritage Site in the world. It's situated in the Eastern Cape. It's one of the Eastern Cape national it's run by the Eastern Cape Parks Board. Cedar Falls is situated at the base cap to the actual Leopard Trail. So that serves as the place where all the Leopard Trail hikers, before they do the actual hike, they come into the base camp, they stay at Cedar Falls, there's a whole lot of accommodation options, and it is from here that they actually enter onto the trail. What a lot of people don't realize is that Cedar Falls is literally, it's an adventure center. So if you go there, you've got mountain bike trails, you've got day hikes, you've got kloofing and canyoning, you've got fantastic birding, superb stargazing. So literally, it is part and parcel of Leopard Trail, but it also stands apart as a place of immense natural beauty that you can go and explore. Leopard Trail covers 7 of the 8 natural biomes. So if you want to explore anything from Karoo vegetation, so the dry minimalist Karoo vegetation, to fynbos, mountaintop fynbos, to dense montane river valleys, everything is there. And because of this, the diversity at Cedar Falls is just mind-blowing. And you think of it as a very dry place, and generally Baviaanskloof comes across as quite an arid destination. But once you go into the mountains here, the beauty is that you find these mountain streams with unbelievable populations of redfin minnows and other indigenous fish, toads, frog species, bird species that you would definitely not expect to find here. So that obviously blew me away. If you venture into the actual, there's an amphitheater, and that is one of the most special places I've been to in South Africa. From a great outdoors point of view, you have to swim through these ice-cold mountain pools, pass through a canyon, and then you get into this massive amphitheater. And inside this amphitheater, you've got all these old cedar trees, some probably like hundreds of years old, clinging to the cliff tops. And you go in there and it's magical. It's like something out of Lord of the Rings. And you really feel an otherworldly presence when you're in there. And it's very different from the arid main road or main kloof that you go through. It's a place where there's waterfalls and you're hemmed in by this amphitheater. So it creates a very different feeling from Baviaanskloof as a whole. But it just shows you how naturally diverse this whole area is. And as Zane said, you've got the Koga Mountains and you've got the Baviaanskloof Mountains. And in between this, you have the kloof running for about 200 odd kilometers. And because of these two mountain ranges, you have a microclimate that goes down the kloof where it's nearly like little weather patterns that you can have snow, you can have winter, you can have summer, you can have howling gales, and it varies from place to place. So those are just some of the natural attractions for me personally, and why I really want to keep going back and back to this amazing place.
Yeah, I think to just add on to Jacques, I think that amphitheater is behind me. That's the final Cedar Falls, and just looking behind Linden, you can see the mountain meadows of day one on the hike, and and look at that lush green bush behind him actually. So it's such a diverse playground, really. And that brings me to, I want to start chatting to you, Linden. You obviously been going to the Baviaanskloof for a lot longer than me and Jacques. How did you find yourself in the Baviaanskloof in the first place, and come about finding yourself on the farm in Cedar Falls and starting this journey?
So I first started going to the Baviaans probably about 27 years ago. I was studying at UCT and had a digs mate who was a botanist, and he was doing his master's thesis on vegetation types And for 3 or 4 months, he had the real privilege of just coming into the Baviaanskloof mountains and mapping vegetation. And so I would join him occasionally, certainly not for that long. And as Jacques said, it was just an amazing experience. It blew me away. At that time, the Baviaanskloof was not well known at all. I remember going back, and then after that first experience, I used to go back every year. It was any holiday I had, I'd go back to the Baviaans. And at that time, it wasn't well known at all. Nowadays, pretty much everyone's heard of the Baviaanskloof, and it's an amazing journey that people have done in their 4x4s when you go through the trail. But at that time, no one knew about the Baviaans. I remember taking a girlfriend there on holidays, and we'd spend days at Rooihoek naked on the beach, and no one would arrive. These days you got 20 cars arriving every day at Rooihoek. In those days, we'd have a week without seeing anyone or hearing a car going past. So it was true wilderness. It was one of these last outposts of really spectacular wilderness. So I kept going back there for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. We'd go for 2 or 3 weeks. We'd hike into the mountains, leave our car parked on the side of the road somewhere, and then hike into the mountains for 7 days, and kind of use the old-fashioned 1 in 50,000 maps, because in those days there weren't GPSs and phones and things. So you actually had to carry a map, and we'd kind of figure out how to get back to the road and then hike back to wherever we'd left the car. So truly amazing experiences. And you can't do that anymore. It's a bit sad in some ways. There are buffaloes now and rhinos, and you can't get those kind of permits to just go out into the wild like we did. But that's really where my passion for the kloof was born. There were some amazing places in the Baviaans that in the back of my head, I still kind of want to go back to secretly one day. Just up, amazing, absolutely spectacular. And then kind of, that passion for the Baviaanskloof grew. And probably about 20 years ago, with my wife-to-be at the time, we weren't married yet, but my wife-to-be, we kind of said, hey, a dream would be to own just a really small piece of land in this magnificent landscape and kind of be able to come out here and actually have our own space. So we spent an incredibly interesting 3 days of driving from farm to farm. At that time, there were quite a few private farms still, and driving from farm to farm and chatting on the stoep with every farmer and his wife, and kind of, asking them if there was a patch of land somewhere we could buy. I think we must have visited about 25 farmers in 3 days. And, you have to accept the tea and biscuit at everyone. So kind of we'd have 7, 8 cups of tea and coffee every day, and just have to stop on the side of the road between farms just to take a pee to get rid of the last bunch of rooibos. But it was an amazing experience. And at the end of that 3 days, there were 1 or 2 options on the cards. It took us a while longer to actually find Cedar Falls. And kind of the first time we drove, we were told about Cedar Falls, and we kind of drove towards it. It was an old road, not well maintained, because the farm itself was run down. No one was living there. And it's a 7-kilometer driveway to get there off the main road. And as we were driving it, you're just going deeper and deeper into this magical kloof. And, as we get to the farm gate, my wife, Jean, gets out to open the gate. And before we've even been into the land, as I drive past her, my window's down, she kind of says, I want this one. It's like, okay, I don't have much choice. This one it'll have to be. And then that was the start of an amazing journey. We feel incredibly privileged to be able to have the experiences we've had in the last 20 years in the Baviaanskloof, and the people we've met and the things we've seen and done. So incredibly privileged to have had that journey.
And the farm, you named it Cedar Falls now, and that's what it's known. But what was it called back then, and that river that you drive past? What is that area called? Is it Mikey's Rivier? I think, Is it?
No, so originally the farm was on the maps. It's called Mikey's Fontaine. Okay. The locals always used to refer to it as Hoekplaas, because it's at the end of a dead end. So the road that goes there doesn't go anywhere else. So it's kind of like in the corner of the mountain. So Hoekplaas is, if you go and ask someone who's been there for 50, 60 years and say to them, where's Hoekplaas, they'll point you our direction. But Mikey's Fontaine was a pretty well a well-known name in a whole different context. So we wanted something that was very unique to the place. And so it had this magnificent waterfall, Zane, the one behind you. And there's, the indigenous Baviaanskloof cedar tree that you don't find anywhere else in the world, except for a very small section of the Baviaanskloof. So Cedar Falls was just a natural name for us to choose as we started developing the place into more of a kind of tourism-focused, outdoorsy kind of place.
Cool. Yeah, I think a very important factor of your journey there is the locals and the Machanis. Jacques, do you wanna chat to Linden a bit more about the Machani family?
Absolutely. I mean, first contact for most people who come onto the Leopard Trail is Willem Machani, who is as much part of the kloof as those cedar trees are. His family has been there for generations. And Willem is as rooted in the earth as those cedar trees. So there's a lot of similarity between him and that hardy, famous and cedar tree vegetation. It's what you see is what you get, but what you don't see is the amount of rootedness that goes from those people into the earth around them. So Willem and Martha and Marlon, their son, who we progressively got to know as we visited Cedar Falls more and more regularly, grew on you in the same way that the landscape grows on you. Initially, you assume that they are purely the workers who work on the farm, but you very soon get a deep sense of them being in charge, so that eventually it feels as if it's Linden working for Willem and definitely not the other way around. So Martha very much runs the kitchen as her domain and the hospitality side of things. And if you want anything, you go and ask Martha from an outdoor perspective. If you go onto the Leopard Trail or the route or the farm itself, it's Willem and his son Marlon who sort of has it in their hands and has everything at their fingertips. So their ability to take you anywhere on the farm or relate to any question around the landscape or the natural environment is quite exceptional. So as you realize that Willem is an integral part of the Go Baviaans team, going back, Go Baviaans is the sort of adventure holding company that Linden created with Leopard Trail as part of it and Base Camp as part of it. And Linden can chat more about that. But what I want to get across is that Willem is central to Go Baviaans, to Leopard Trail, to Leopard Run, to Base Camp. And 9 times out of 10, when you get to the farm, Linden or Jean won't be on the farm. Willem and Martha will be on the farm, and they are the guys who organizes everything and puts everything together. At that point, juncture of the story, I want Linden to go back, because I know we spoke about this earlier, and he mentioned his first meeting with Willem and with the family, and maybe Linden, you can take us through that from your perspective.
Yeah, Jacques, 100%. And, you're 100% right. Willem in particular, he is one of the most remarkable human beings I've ever met. And I feel incredibly grateful and privileged to count him as a friend and a partner in everything we do in the Baviaanskloof. And that extends back to his whole family. They are truly the heart of the project. And, you're not wrong. Jean and I, we don't live in the Baviaans. We don't live at Cedar Falls. Willem is 100% the manager of the entire project, including the Leopard Trail. He co-manages it with Martha. And the entire way the business has been set up in the Leopard Trail in particular, which I'm sure we'll get to a little bit later, is that it is a community project and co-founded by Willem and I, the Leopard Trail. And its entire purpose is to serve the community in a whole bunch of different ways. And it is owned through a community structure. And Willem is very much the heart and soul of that process. In terms of when I first met Willem, once again, it was on that trip, ironically, that we spoke about earlier when we were looking for land. And we went to one of the neighboring farms. Once again, it was deserted. No one lived there. And we thought, okay, we need a place to stay for the night. Let's camp here. And a much younger Willem than he is today came walking up to us with his sheepdog and tatters. He was literally living off the land. He had clothes that were very ragged, but absolute sense of dignity of himself, of his own place in the world. And very politely but very firmly, he said to us, "Sorry, guys, you can't camp here." His arrangement with the absentee landowner was that Willem could run his 20 sheep on the farm, on condition that Willem kept other people off the farm. And so Willem lived in a little shack in a piece of this corner, and he literally spent his days with the sheep in the mountains. So when people like us arrived in our nice big fancy car, he was very, very firm, but incredibly civil and polite and just the most amazing human being. And we chatted to him for a little bit and we went off and found a different place. We eventually did buy Cedar Falls. And one of the first things we wanted to do, because all the buildings were falling apart, it hadn't been lived in for many years, we wanted to renovate the 100-year-old farmhouse. And so we kind of put the word out amongst the locals that we were doing this and invited anyone who wanted to come work for that 2 or 3 months. And at that time, Willem came and joined. And within 3 to 4 weeks, it was absolutely clear that Tia was a remarkable human being. Renovating an old farmhouse is actually more kind of figuring stuff out as you're going along, because you want to respect the way things were done 100 years ago and kind of use building technologies that match that. And so there's a lot of figuring stuff out and just thinking stuff through. And very quickly it became clear that, when Willem and I would have a look at something and chat through it, that we'd kind of feed off each other, but the end result was the right one. So there was an immediate this respect in this relationship for who he was. And then at the end of that project, I said, hey, Willem, obviously all in Afrikaans, because that's Willem's home language. We're not going to be living here, and we want someone to come and run the farm and kind of, we weren't going to farm it, but just be there and manage tourism. And he just looked me straight in the eyes and he said, no, thanks. My experience, this was him talking. He said, my experience of working for other people is that no one ever treats you right. Here's a guy who's absolutely destitute, but it wasn't like he was chasing money. He just wanted to live in a way that matched his view of the world and how he believed himself to be of value and how we wanted people to treat him. And so even at that moment that he said no, there was like this real awareness from us that, here's a remarkable human being. And we hoped that at some time in the future, we would have some way of working together and engaging. And then it was about 6 or 7 months later that the farm he was on got sold. And one day we were sitting there and Willem comes walking up the 7-kilometer dirt road and kind of comes in, and we invite him up for coffee, and he just looks at us and he said, listen, if you're still interested, I'm still interested, but you need to know something. I don't know how to manage anything. So if you want to teach me, I'm keen to learn, but please understand that I don't know how to do this. And once again, just that clarity, that integrity, that authenticity, not to come and play games, not to try and do anything, but just to be upfront like that. I've met very few human beings who have had such an impact on me as Willem in terms of who you are in the world and how you should just show up authentically. So yeah, that was a good 20 years ago, and we've never looked back since then. We got to know his parents very well. I feel deeply honored that we got to meet them before they both died. Oom Kivit and Tani Mita, we used to go down to their spot, which is about 20 minutes away from the farm, this little farmer's laborer's cottage on another deserted farm, and we'd sit with them and talk to them. And you could just see the stock of where Willem came from, this family of absolute values, and just a hard place to grow up. There's no doubt about it. And Jacques, you mentioned it earlier. The official statistics I can't give you, but it's probably about 80% of adults there have alcoholic related addiction, and so it's a tough place. But his family just had this way of finding their way in the world and not becoming alcoholic, which I have a huge amount of respect for. I think any of us who have known alcoholics, it's a tough thing. It's a disease, and it's really hard not to be in an environment like that. And so a lot of respect for their ability to kind of figure out who they are and how they wanted to live in that space.
Absolutely. Look. Sorry, Zane.
Go for it.
I was just going to get in on that point, because Marlon, Willem and Martha's son, has followed in those exact footsteps, and that to me is also quite incredible. And when Zane and EcoBound started putting together the Leopard Run, which is a 3-day trail run, Marlon went from nowhere to helping with the route and everything, and then started actually running as part of the event. And he ended up being a really good trail runner, and just shows the determination and the absolute spirit of that family. I think Marlon captures that in the next generation.
Yeah, 100%. Marlon's a great young man. He certainly is, and both Willem and I, even though we're kind of around 50, we kind of look to the future. We're pretty confident the Leopard Trail will become an iconic hike for many years to come, decades, 50, 60, 70 years, because it is that special. And, we're already looking to the future around what does this look like to ensure sustainability. And Marlon is very key to that future. If he chooses to be, he might not, he might choose something else, which absolutely we respect. But at the moment, and it's not just the Machani family. We've got 5 families that are now part of the Leopard Trail team, and so all of them are the trail is fundamentally built and as an idea around the community and how to do things differently in a pretty beautiful but sometimes hard landscape. So all those families are at the very core of the Leopard Trail, and we're figuring out as we go along how to use the Leopard Trail as the springing board for so many different things. And all of these families are core and central to those kind of thinking and decisions.
Yeah, so I think that leads us to one of the other points I wanted to bring up, Linden, and ask you. I think that, not many people that still lives today gets the opportunity to start a iconic hike from scratch. I think like some of our other iconic hikes in the country, I don't know who started them, and they probably were more government-orientated projects, and there's nobody that could say, okay, but we started it. And I just think, I want you to dial back into how it all started and how you came about with the idea to start a hike in what, like if you just went back to Jacques' explanation of the landscape there, in quite a difficult space to think that you would put people out in those mountains and hike a trail. So, and there was not, you can tell us, but as far as I know, there wasn't anything. There was no trail.
Yes, Zane, you're scaring off future hikers. It's a hard landscape. Man, it's a beautiful trail, and it's it's a trail well worth it. You're not gonna die and be abandoned. So listen, 100%. When we arrived 20 years ago, I at the time was doing both environmental and community work. And so a huge part of myself and John's passion was marrying the two and figuring out how to make economies that are based in conservation work for everyone in the community who lives there. So that has always been our passion. And we started doing a few projects as soon as we arrived. And we can have a chat about those later if we have time. But after about 10 years, we realized we wanted something bigger. We wanted a project that would be able to drive community development in this particular area for a much longer time, and actually produce funds that could be used for community development. Because the worst part about community development projects is having to go out and find funding to go and do the things that you think can make the biggest impact. And I've always liked the idea of figuring out a magic recipe where the projects themselves are generating great revenue that you can use for future community projects. So we were always looking for what is that one big project that's going to help drive this. And at the time, 10 years ago, Willem and I were sitting around a fire. We had one or two people from the Parks Board coming, and we invited them to come and say, hey guys, we've got an idea we want to chat to you about. And we spoke about this idea of a trail, of a slack packing trail, and that we could really make it work. And so, to answer your question, 100%, it's been an amazing privilege to start a trail like this from scratch and to be able to put in place what we really wanted. And there are different components to that. The actual physically designing a trail was just some of the funnest times I've had in a long time. We were very clear on what we wanted. We wanted a trail that was going to open up the Baviaanskloof to a lot of people, as many people as possible. But it still had to take you into the mountains. It couldn't be like a little 2-kilometer stroll. You needed to be hiking fit, but we wanted it to really penetrate some of the beautiful places of those mountains. And to get as big an audience as possible, we made the early decision to make it slack packing rather than that you carried your things with you. That also made commercial sense. The whole point of the Leopard Trail is to make money for future, firstly to employ people, but then also to fund other community projects in the future. And there's just a much bigger market for slack packing than there is for non-slack packing hikes. So it was very clear for us we wanted to go that route. So it was actually fun. We kind of sat down, we had a look at Cedar Falls in the middle of this landscape, and we said, where could we get a bakkie to drop people's bags off? And literally in the vast expanse around us, there were only 3 places where you could get with a very good 4x4. So that kind of decided where the overnight spots would be. And then it was really about how do you link those spots with an exciting trail. I mean, we learned a lot. So we'd, Willem and I would spend days and weeks kind of walking those mountains. There were no trails, just game tracks, certainly no 4x4 trails or hiking trails. And we'd kind of go down one kloof and then backtrack out and try the next one, or go up to the plateau and have a look around. Google Earth helped at that time. And finally, we kind of pieced together the 4-day trip that would connect these spots where a bakkie could drop off things. And we built a rough trail. We had a team of 10 locals in the mountains for 6 months building a kind of a layout. And then we invited some really experts, kind of trail runners, people who hike a lot, people who write about hiking. And we said, guys, please come test this for us. And early on, we got some really good advice, because what we had done is we had pretty much built a trail that went from point A to B, but there weren't many surprises. You knew you were going from A to B. And the one person, I can't remember who it was, but they said, listen, a trail's got to be like a good novel. It's got to be like a good story, that you think the story is going in one direction, but then suddenly something happens and you're going suddenly in a different direction you weren't expecting. And that is what makes a trail interesting. And so we kind of had to go back and look at our path and think, okay, there are a few things we need to change here, where let's push people off in this direction and head you up to a deep kloof that as you're getting closer, you're thinking, oh my goodness, are we really going in that? Because I don't know how we're going to get out again. And then as you get to the base of the kloof, the path kind of turns 170 degrees and goes up the side and then over the ridge. So really putting in these kind of stories into the landscape and the trail. Maybe it's a bit philosophical, it's just a hiking trail, but we really wanted something that told a story as you walk through the landscape. It starts in a particular way, then it goes through days where you're going ridge hopping, literally up and down over saddles, then 10 kilometers following a valley floor, then you're up on the plateau. In each of those sections, we really were trying to expose you to different pieces of what the Baviaanskloof has to offer. So yeah, absolute privilege. It was those days of being out in those mountains when there was no trail. Willem and I just kind of, and me keeping up with Willem was was hard work. I think Jacques said it earlier. Willem's kind of like this landscape. When he goes, and he goes straight up. There's no kind of zigzagging. There's no finding an easy path. It's like, that's where I'm going. So for him, the logic is you just go there. So I really struggled to keep up with him. I kind of would pull out my map and pretend to be writing stuff on the map just so that he'd be forced to wait and I could catch my breath. But no, those were good days. Those were amazing period of months getting that right.
Isn't there, sorry, Jacques, isn't there a bit of a story about some of the trails and Willem and zigzagging there, Linden?
Yeah, absolutely. When it came to actually getting the final trail cut, we'd say to the guys, okay, guys, we're going from here, but we need to get to the top of the saddle. So please zigzag your way up. And we'd come back, I wasn't able to be there. So the guys would be cutting that trail and I was away. And I'd come back 3 weeks later and this trail zigzagging is not really what it would do. It would kind of maybe go a little bit side to side, but it was pretty much going straight up. And I'd sit there and I'd go, but Willem, we had a conversation around this. What about the zigzag? And he goes, yeah, we made it zigzag. I was like, that's not zigzag. And he looks at me and he goes, yeah, but the quickest way up is straight. So why the zigzag stuff? And that's just his approach to it. So, we had to then kind of recut those trails and kind of, and it's really interesting because, from my experience, I almost assumed we've hiked before. We know what a zigzag trail looks like. Willem has, he's lived his life in a mountain, but he's never gone and hiked a hiking trail. He just walks to find the sheep and then he goes straight up. So there was a lot of kind of having to rethink my assumptions around kind of hiking trails and what's the logic behind them and figure out how to actually test that logic with someone like him in the mountains. So yeah, a great learning, absolute some of the best months of my life that decade ago. It was very special.
John, you can go.
Linden, that conversation brings us into the whole concept of the wow factor that you guys are bringing into the Leopard Trail. Personally, there are quite a few wow factors for me. I mean, we mentioned the actual Cedar Falls mini hike into the canyon, which is not part of the actual trail, but is such a beautiful one-day hike that I think most hikers add that on as either an extra day or as a side trail that they do from the huts. But then obviously there's Gabriel Pools, which is it is just like such an incredible spot as well. It's very similar to the image behind Zane, which is going into the amphitheater with a waterfall and everything. There's Birdsong Valley, there's the Cauldron, which is, as its name suggests, you can really, really bake in there. But from your point of view, what would be your favorite wow spots along the trail?
So, Jacques, interesting, because when we started the trail, one of the conversations Willem and I had at the time, and a few of the other people who were kind of around, was what's our vision for this thing? What is the trail's purpose? And its purpose was always about becoming a legacy trail. So firstly, a trail that was up there with the best in the country. But even more than that, a sustainable source of employment, of revenue, of a space from which other projects can begin. And the only way you do that is by making a trail that's really successful. And it's an early decision we made was that we want people to hike the Leopard Trail because they've heard that here is this amazing trail that blows you away in every aspect of it, rather than let's go support a community project. Yeah. And I think what's really interesting is that I think most people who hike the Leopard Trail don't even know it's a community project because we don't push that. We push what a great trail it is. So we set out from the beginning to create a business, even though it's community owned, but a business that would blow people away. So that the exchange of value would always be you want to come and hike because you're getting something in return for the fee you paid. And we kind of captured that in this concept from early on about wow, that every aspect of what we wanted a hiker to experience had to be wow. So, and it was a great, easy concept for us all to get behind and for the team to get behind. So, when we think about any decision we make on the trail, is this wow or not? And we want that experience from the minute you first hear about us and go onto the website. Our website must go wow. From the minute you start engaging with Catherine, our bookings person, and the service you get and how simple the booking is, we want you to have wow. That was the best hiking booking experience I've ever had. From the minute you arrive on the farm and start engaging with Willem and the service you get on the ground, it must be wow. And this is even before you started hiking. Then the landscape itself obviously has wow to it. Then when it came to designing huts, we went and sat down and said, okay, what would make our huts go wow? So that the minute you saw them, you went wow. And then every decision has just got this ethos of it has to pop, it has to go wow, so that hikers just come back, can't wait to talk about it. So it's small things like when we're buying mattresses for the overnight huts, we didn't go normal kind of Parks Board, National Parks or Eastern Cape Province Parks Board mattresses. We went proper expensive mattresses so that when you wake up on day 2, you've just had your first night's sleep, you're like, oh, wow, I had such a good night's sleep because these mattresses are proper good mattresses that you'd find in a 4-star hotel. We want people to arrive at the huts and there's this beautiful swimming pool with crystal clear mountain water. The choice to do that was wow. You can crack open a bottle of our craft beer and it'll be cold and delivered to you hundreds of kilometers from anywhere that you'd ever think you'd get a nice ice cold craft beer on a hike, but you're getting one, and that's wow. So this principle of wow really drives as many of our decisions as possible. Not always easy because, sometimes creating that wow is in the middle of nowhere is not easy. Current example, and the journey to wow is not something you just start with and everything's wow. It's something you learn as you go along. So a good example at the moment is we're really struggling with our pools to keep the water nice and clean. In the kind of summer months when it's hot, the pools are quite small. You've got 12 people every day swimming a lot. You're getting suntan oil, you're getting, dirt and sweat and flesh. And that's the kind of stuff that makes the pools go green very quickly. The algae growth thrives on people in the pool. That's what they love. And so, those pools are going, because we don't have chlorine systems or anything, they're going green every 3 or 4 days. And so we have to empty the pool and then pump, often solar pump from like 6 kilometers away from the mountains, more clean water. But that solar pump won't fill that pool in 1 day. So then you've got hikers coming the next day who are either experiencing a half full pool, and that's not wow. So now as a team, we're having to sit and think, guys, how are we going to solve this problem to make it wow? Because that's our target. We're not going to say, okay, well, let's just tell hikers that they shouldn't expect this because it's difficult to keep pools clean and full the whole time with mountain water. We're not going to get the hikers to accept that, hey, it's tough, so we haven't given you the wow. We rather want to own the obligation to make something wow and keep that standard and solve the problems. So, it's that kind of thing. It's a ethos around wow. And I think the last piece, I know I'm talking a lot about wow because you can see it's a passion for us. The last piece around wow is also part of all our community projects, and it's something Willem and I spoke about a lot in the beginning days, is how do we create an environment for all the people working on the project that they can bring out the best of themselves? For many of them, that hasn't been an environment or an expectation. They go to school and there's no kind of expectation at school that the kids need to be wow. It's kind of like just show up, playing in the dust, and it's not like the school had this ethos of perform and be great and be the best you can be. So we were very clear that how do we actually, even through the way we run our projects, create environments that's allowing the people involved to kind of go, wow, I can do something special. I can be part of something that's not just okay, but it's great, because that itself helps that kind of journey of each individual working on the trail to become more of who they can be, to tap into their own potential and kind of see themselves differently. And so the wow ethos is even about our underlying purpose of creating something for this community and for all of us, myself included, that lifts us to being better than we were before. So it's kind of that wow factor really infuses itself through everything we try and do on the Leopard Trail.
Sure, that's quite special, that wow ethos, and I mean, you've, in the years that we've known each other, you've always mentioned that, but you've now quite clearly stated the 3 legs of the wow, and that's really cool. Linden, I think almost I want to ask you about the success of Leopard Trail and how it got to being if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you've got an open spot for the next 100 days on the hike, which is really amazing to have seen that grow so quickly. I think we're talking about a space of 3 years for that. And I think you've just answered that question with the wow factor, but do you want to elaborate about what you think is the key and the success in what you're seeing in Leopard Trail at the moment?
Yeah, the wow factor is definitely a part of it. I mean, I think it's in an amazing landscape. So people want to walk the Baviaanskloof because it is special. It really is special. And the wow factor of driving that is and making sure that the best way to market a trail is word of mouth, where people go home and say, you've got to do this. And where magazines come and write about us and say, sure, this is going to be one of the iconic hikes in South Africa for the future. That certainly is the best way of doing it. Facebook helps, to be honest. From the beginning, we really kind of figured out, we tried to learn how to really, what's the best medium for us. Our target market was probably the kind of 30s to 60s. That's the kind of most hikers. So not yet the Instagram, more Facebook. So we kind of figured that out. Try to figure out how to grow the amount of people paying attention to us. So we use a lot of really clever marketing. You guys are a part of that for us in terms of the videos you make. Videos are massive. And because it is such a beautiful hike, the footage lends itself to making these short kind of 2-minute videos, which we then push onto Facebook and really try and get people excited about hiking. So I think there's a combination of the natural beauty of the hike. Slack packing helps. The fact that the huts have been built now by the Parks Board, who are our partners, the Eastern Cape Parks and Tourism Agency, and we really went for wow in the huts. We wanted 50% glass walls in all the huts. Even the way the huts are broken up, that there are 3 sleeping huts instead of just one, and each one only has 4 people and swimming pools. And so we really have tried to make it a complete experience that people will go home and rave about. I'm confident that we've done that well. We're very busy at the moment. The trail is popping. And I'm looking forward to seeing what else we can do to keep growing that wow factor, without taking away the fact that you're in the middle of nowhere. In a way, that's the great thing about it. We can make these overnight spots as really cool as possible, but you still got to walk from one spot to the next, and there's no getting around that. So, as nice as we make the huts, you're still going to have to get out into the wilderness and really experience what the Baviaanskloof is about on foot. And that's really the key principle here.
Linden, before we get into a little bit more about you, I just want to add from the wow factor side, obviously us coming in as outsiders, the one wow factor that I feel you haven't mentioned is how much the Leopard Trail changes from season to season. And I've not been fortunate enough to experience the snow, real winter side of things, but I've seen footage of it. And it's like something out of the Canada Rocky Mountains when you're in those mountains and the snowstorms come in. And it's simple. So you have a very different character during winter to what you have during summer. Summer is more harsh. It's more in your face. It can be extremely hot. It can be quite challenging. Spring brings with it beautiful lull in weather, moderate, temperate sort of climatic conditions. Autumn brings that big skies, the stillness. So I think that to me is also one of the wow factors of the Leopard Trail. Is you can, in 4 years, go and hike the Leopard Trail in a different season every year and have a completely different experience, and that's really wow. So, yeah.
Sorry, you're 100% right. Even I look at this picture in my background here on the screen, and I smile because this picture was 6 years ago, and then the year after that, we had that massive fire, and you mentioned it earlier when you came out. And you won't see the greenery that you're seeing there in that year. It was completely black. It was like a moonscape. There was nothing except burnt rock. So if you had walked it the year before versus walking it then, it would have been completely different. I think we still got about 3 to 4 years to go, hopefully with good rains, to get back to that level of greenery that's in the background. So even not only between seasons, But even as the landscape, because fynbos has this natural cycle of burning, regrowth, burning. Even from one year to the next, even if it's the same season, you're getting a different experience of the landscape. And it is, and absolutely, I have the privilege, I have the luck of being able to, I have to walk it every year, at least 2 or 3 times to keep checking on erosion patterns, etc. But every time I've walked it, and I've walked it probably 20 times now in the last 5-6 years, it's just magnificent. And each time I'm experiencing it slightly differently. And it is a very different hike in winter to, 35, 36 degrees summer versus 2 degrees winter. It's a completely different experience. But everyone will be wow, and that's what we're going for.
That's exactly it, and that is the beauty of the Leopard Trail, and also the environment. As you come around a corner or out of a kloof or crest a little summit, you just literally, you do go wow, and sometimes you probably add a couple of 4-letter words to it because it's just so vast and poof, head explodingly beautiful.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you mentioned that you get to hike the trail a couple of times every year, but you also have let's call it a real job, which a lot of people don't know about. We know that you're not like a hitman for the CIA, as far as I know, but maybe you want to tell us what you and Jean do when you're hiding away on your coastal life.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. The Leopard Trail is a side project for us. It's something we do as a legacy project, something we want to leave behind when we're gone, and have made an impact on people's lives in this country, which we love and are passionate about. So, but it's not our day job. I am a chief product officer for a global financial technology company that deals with global real estate investment platforms, commercial real estate investment platforms. So that keeps me busy during the day hours. My wife Jean has recently just closed her practice. She was a therapist and works with mainly women around fertility issues, but also helping resolve trauma, and just generally offering coaching mainly to women as they move through different phases in their life. So, very grounded, immensely skilled. But once again, this is not her, the Leopard Trail and what we do in the Baviaanskloof is not her full-time job either. So yeah, that's our backgrounds. That's who we are. We live in Knysna. Absolutely love Knysna, passionate about it, about as passionate as we are as the Baviaanskloof. Feel incredibly privileged that we've got these 2 landscapes in our life that are both incredibly different, but equally amazing. And so yeah, once again, I've probably used the word privileged and blessed so many times in this last hour, but it's 100% true for, I think, every aspect of how we experience our lives.
Linden, are there any specific challenges to running the Leopard Trail remotely? Obviously, you have Willem and Marta and Marlon and the rest of the team in situ, but communication-wise, it's obviously not always easy to get messages through, and then logistically, from the point of view of having product, food, equipment available on the trail when hikers come in. Maybe take us through some of the logistical challenges.
It is. It's a tricky place to operate from. You can't just pop out to the shops or the hardware store when you need something. You have to have thought it through beforehand. Willem on the ground really runs the whole Leopard Trail, and he is exceptionally good at it. He has an absolute commitment to making sure things are working. When something's not working, he takes it personally. He feels really bad. He embodies wow more than anyone I've ever met. So, and from that point, it's really easy actually for me to do my role, which is really just help out on some of the strategic, bigger picture stuff while he actually runs the trail. So, I'm definitely there to support him and the team in terms of accomplishing what the Leopard Trail does. And so I see myself in very much a support role. There are, we've always known that running something like this would have challenges, and we've kind of put in place the systems and the methods to deal with it. So, how we recycle and ride because we don't want to leave things like glass and tin, etc., in the kloof. So we ride that out. And, so there's a whole bunch of systems around getting things into the kloof as well as what we take out of the kloof. Probably the biggest challenge that we always are with is that it's an incredibly remote place. And we feel a deep sense of accountability for the hikers and the hikers' well-being. So making sure we have the right emergency processes and systems that if anything goes wrong, there are no roads that you can just go and pick up a hiker who's in trouble, and there's no cell phone reception. So it's not like they can just phone you and say, hey, I've got a problem. So it's putting in place those kind of things that we need. And so, we use Spot devices. So shout out to Spot who have supported us here, so that there's satellite SMS emergency signals that we can pinpoint people in terms of where they are, GPS. Every group of hikers, we give one of those to walk with. And then we have, helicopter emergency rescue systems and insurance and etc. So just making sure that our hikers are always safe and their well-being is being looked after is obviously a massive concern for us. The Baviaanskloof is a wild place. You get every 5 or 6 years, you'll have big fires. Sometimes you'll get flash floods if you're there when a big thunderstorm comes through. And, some of our paths walk along valleys. We're very comfortable that we've made the trail very safe as much as we can. But, there's snakes, this is nature, there's things that happen. So I think that's probably our biggest challenge that we try and manage very aggressively, is making sure our hikers have what they need in case they get into trouble so that we can support them getting out of trouble.
100. Speaking about the logistical side of things, I think this sort of channels very well into the Leopard Run, Zane. From a logistical point of view and from a landscape point of view, the Leopard Trail is a difficult area in which to put together an event, especially an event with a sense of a strong and ethical environmental sense, but also in where you want to bring in a little bit of luxury over 3 days. How did you and Linden first discuss the opportunity of the Leopard Day or the Leopard Run stage race, and how did that all come about?
Yeah, I think we've definitely, as EcoBound Adventures, have had a relationship with the Baviaanskloof, not quite as long as Linden, but it's always been part of, since I've been part of EcoBound in the family and got married into it with Trans-Baviaans, which is our big mountain bike race that goes through the kloof. It's always been part of what we do. And funny enough, Linden mentioned Facebook earlier, and we've always known Linden, and we've known the good work that he did with Vera's, with Veronica, and then at their little Roaster Cook restaurant that they've put up there. And Veronica actually manages, along with Katrina, her sister, our whole first checkpoint of the Trans-Baviaans. And we saw something, I think Linden posted an advert or something on Facebook about maybe doing a trail run. And I was just getting into more trail running scenes and events at that stage. And drove through to Linden. We had a quick meeting. I think it was decided within an hour, Linden, if I remember correctly, that we would make a event here. And we then, it still carried on for probably a year of me going to the farm, running, checking with Linden, chatting to Willem, thinking about what's possible and what we can do. Linden's already then at that point had a good idea of running basically 2 days of the trail in one, which was then in the end the method we went with. But we've now presented the event for 3 years. It is a tough run. The second day of the run, so the first day you do a 10K up into the kloof to that amphitheater behind me. And then the second day is a 34K proper mountain run. And it's a hard run. but it's a beautiful run with a lot of wow factors, like Linden will correct me. And I think that Linden and I have actually chatted about this now again, and I think I want to ask Linden to come in here as well a bit, but the idea is definitely to open up the space a bit more as an adventure destination, and Linden has built some great mountain bike trails now on the mountain and on the farm. He's got a flow trail there, and I think there's opportunity to do more around a festival and trail running and the events and doing shorter runs and that sort of thing. Linden, I think our very first meeting was around making Cedar Falls an adventure destination base camp. You want to share a bit more of your thoughts about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the tragedies for me about the Baviaans is most people stay in their cars, they drive through it on a 4x4. Whereas actually for me, the magic is when you get out of your car, whether you're on your mountain bike or on your feet walking or when you trail run. It is, there are so many places you can't even get close to with a car that are magical. So our vision has always been that Cedar Falls is slightly different probably from the rest of the Baviaanskloof, which is very much focused on the 4x4 community. We're very interested in those people who want to come and experience Baviaanskloof outside of their car. Whether that's just sitting around in the guest houses at night, having beautiful stars above you, or whether it's waking up in the morning, walking to the waterfalls or doing one of the trails or being on the Leopard Trail, but really getting people to experience it that way. So everything we do at Cedar Falls is really about that. It's about how can you kind of, you arrive, you close your car and you don't get into it until you leave. And that's really the principle. Can we keep you engaged and excited about being on hiking trails, mountain biking trails for 3 or 4 or 5 days, or just enjoying being there in its beauty without having to be car based. So that's very much the core principle for us. It's let's get people out, let's people who want to experience it on their feet, on their bikes, have that opportunity.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think it's a brilliant space to do that, and it's great. It's a gateway. It's just past what they call the Baviaanskloof Sleutel, past through the Nuwe Kloof passes as you come in from that side of the kloof. Linden, I think Jacques, I don't know if you've got anything more to ask, but I think we're getting close to wrapping up our conversation. But I want to try and get from you. You've obviously explained a lot about what you're doing as a community project with the Leopard Trail, and your focus, that you just mentioned about the adventure destinations and things like that. People listening, we don't know who's listening, but how can people get involved with, if they want to put their hands up and say they want to be part of this legacy or this journey, or get involved in a small way or in a big way? What are things that you can sort of see people getting involved with, and how can people reach you and contact you guys to be involved in the Leopard Trail?
Great question. So our website is gobaviaans.co.za. So just gobaviaans.co.za. And on that, there are different ways you can contact us. Catherine, who is our booking manager, there's an email address, there's phone calls. We're always excited to hear people's ideas. The possibilities here are endless in terms of what we can do both on the trail, but also in terms of the community work. And if, we're always excited about people who share that idea and that passion and that commitment and want to partner with us. From a Leopard Trail perspective, we are always looking for resources to make the WOW even better. So if you're someone who works in the space or runs companies in the space, there are always opportunities to partner with us. We'd be very grateful for any support we can get that can help us make the project go further and expand its impact. There's always a list of things we're looking for in our next plans. I think we should, the vision for the next 30 years is literally open, and the possibilities are endless. We're hoping that within probably a year or two, we would have paid back the loan that we had to take to start the trail. So it was an amazing journey that, here's this not-for-profit community organization that needed some money to get going. So we had to borrow money, and we were very lucky. We found some private people who supported the initiative. Probably going to take us another year to pay that back. And then after that, all the revenue from the Leopard Trail goes into the next community project. And probably our first on the list is we'd really like a school for our team members' children, but also there's a whole bunch of families who live in and around the Leopard Trail who have children, and they're getting very bad education is probably the best way I could do it. And there's technology these days, and so it's very possible for us to set up a really high-tech community school based at the base camp of the Leopard Trail. So those kind of projects, we really want to expand how the Leopard Trail is impacting the community. So, whatever, and that's just an example. There are hundreds of other things that are possible. So, anyone who is in that space or would like to be involved in the Leopard Trail as sponsors or partners in any way, please do get a hold of us. We're always open to ideas and collaboration.
Awesome. Jacques, anything else from your side before we say cheers to everybody?
Yeah, a couple of things that I know that most people, when they think about Baviaanskloof and what we're speaking about, Leopard Trail and the Leopard Run, the things that come up is hiking and trail running. But you have to think wider than that when you're thinking of the Leopard Trail. As we mentioned, there's a really kick-ass mountain biking trail, a flow trail, as well as a sort of half-day route. And you need to go and ride that as an adventure ride. It's not something that you can get on your bike and gun it and finish it in 2.5 hours, but that's not the point. You want to be out there the whole day. You want to actually go ride until you bump into the wild horses in the meadows and communicate with them and sit with them and look at them, or until you bump into the troop of baboons. And there are quite a few troops of baboons up there. Get off your bike, sit on a rock, be the baboon, look at what they're doing, rummage around the rocks. Zane's pretty good at unleashing his inner baboon kind of thing. That is what you want to do when you're there. You want to go back into an Australopithecus mindset where you are the first human on Earth walking this planet, and you can literally, in most of these cases, if you go into a place like Gabriel's Pools, you can go au natural. You can take off your friggin' kit and walk naked and swim in the pools and feel the fynbos aromas on your skin and smell the fynbos. There are Bushman paintings. There are so many amazing things there. So from my point of view, you want to think that wide. So you want to think about the mountain biking. You want to think about the opportunities of birding. You want to think about the botany. You want to think about photography. And you want to think about astronomy. Stargazing is great. So it is a lot wider than trail running and hiking from my point of view.
Cool. I think we've lost Linden there due to connection, but I'm very happy with that. Thanks, Jacques. Thanks for everybody listening. And I'm going to play out this for the guys that's watching it on the video, our latest little community video about the Leopard Trail, to say cheers. And people listening, the YouTube link to the video is in the show notes. Cheers, everybody. Have a good day.
Fantastic, guys. Lovely to see you all. Go well.
The story of the Leopard Trail is far more than just a great iconic hike.
Hier op Cedar Falls, as ons almal van
Almost every hiker's bucket list of must-do hikes. 10 years ago, the idea of the Leopard Trail was really born around a campfire by the team at the Cedar Falls. We were dwarfed by the night sky. There were silhouettes of the magnificent mountains of the Baviaanskloof World Heritage Site, and it was really calling us to do something special. So the next day we worked through the plan of how it could work, what would be required. We really thought about how to set it up as a community project. The best routes were going to take us into the reserve. And for that we needed the Eastern Cape Parks and Tourism Agency to agree to the project. We really needed their permission and cooperation and partnership to send hikers into these great Baviaanskloof mountains. And that's what happened. Over the next few months, the Parks Board really became an enthusiastic partner, supporting the idea wholeheartedly. It was 5 or 6 years into the project when we received an unexpected and surprising call from the ECPTA. Through a partnership with the National Department of Tourism, they had been able to secure funds for the building of huts on the trail. The huts are now complete and are superb. The Leopard Trail is consistently included in almost every magazine article's must-do hikes in South Africa. We've all been aligned on this vision of an iconic hike, but one that had far more meaning than that. One that was fundamentally about creating a community-owned and run opportunity within a Parks Board land that really transformed the opportunities facing people who lived here.
Ek is Willem gaan en ek nooi almal uit om deel te wees van hierdie reis.